Ancient stones hold the secrets of masters we can never name. Anatolia, a land where empires rose and fell, is a living museum of anonymous genius. This journey will reveal the hidden hands behind history's greatest wonders, from colossal temples to golden tombs. You will discover how these artisans shaped our world and why they vanished from the record. Who were the visionaries who carved a mountain into a sanctuary before the wheel was invented? What profound belief compelled a painter to leave a masterpiece unsigned? By the end, you will see history not as a list of kings, but as a story written by unseen artists. What does true legacy look like when the creator is forgotten? To stand on this land is to feel the weight of ages beneath your feet. Anatolia is not merely a place on a map, but a crossroads of continents, a stage where human ambition met the unyielding rock of reality. Its geography carved its destiny. Towering mountains and deep valleys created natural fortresses and isolated plains, while its position as a bridge between Europe and Asia made it a prize for every rising empire. This was the canvas. First came the Hittites, forging an empire in bronze and iron. Then the Phrygians, whose legendary king Midas turned everything to gold. The Greeks built magnificent coastal cities, their philosophies echoing in marble halls. The Romans followed, then the Byzantines, and finally the Ottomans, each layering their own dreams upon the stone. This relentless cycle of creation and conquest forged a unique artistic environment. An artisan in a Hittite quarry might have used techniques that would, 1,000 years later, be refined by a Greek sculptor working on a temple for a Roman patron. They were not working in isolation but as part of a chain of knowledge that stretched across millennia. The land itself provided the palette. Rich veins of pristine marble awaited the sculptor's chisel. Volcanic glass, known as obsidian, was prized for tools and ornaments. Copper, tin, and silver from Anatolian mines were traded across the ancient world, funding grand projects and fueling innovation. And because this was a hub of global trade, ideas traveled as fast as goods. A design from Mesopotamia could inspire a carver in Cappadocia. A new glazing technique from the East might be adopted by a potter in a bustling Ottoman workshop. This constant exchange meant that Anatolian artistry was never pure, but always a blend, a magnificent fusion that gave birth to styles found nowhere else on Earth. Yet this very dynamism, this constant churn of cultures, is precisely why so many masters remain nameless. When one civilization falls to another, the records of the old gods are often destroyed. The patron's name is chiseled away, the workshop is buried under new construction. The individual artist, no matter how brilliant, was swept into the anonymous current of history. We are left with their breathtaking work, a testament to a collective genius that transcended any single empire. So when we gaze upon a weathered statue or a mosaic fragment, we are not just looking at one artist's labor. We are seeing the accumulated skill of a crossroads, the silent collaboration of countless hands across time. 11,000 years ago, a group of people looked at a barren limestone ridge and saw a sanctuary. This is Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest known temple complex, built by minds so ancient they predate writing, the wheel, and even settled farming. Its creators are the first great anonymous masters of Anatolia. They were hunter-gatherers, yet they achieved the impossible. They quarried colossal limestone pillars, some weighing over 20 tons from local quarries. Without metal tools or beasts of burden, they shaped and moved these monoliths, setting them into precise circles that align with the stars. Each T-shaped pillar is a masterpiece, etched with a menagerie of fierce creatures. Vultures, scorpions, foxes, and lions crawl across the stone, their forms fluid and shockingly sophisticated. What compelled them to undertake such a back-breaking, generation-spanning project? The site offers no clear answers. There are no homes, no graves, no signs of permanent settlement. It was not a city. It seems to have been a purely spiritual destination, a cathedral for a forgotten religion. Archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who dedicated his life to uncovering the site, believed it was a place of pilgrimage, drawing hunter-gatherer groups from across the region for shared rituals. This idea turns our understanding of history on its head. We always assumed that agriculture came first, providing the surplus food and stable society that allowed for grand projects like temples. But Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite. Perhaps it was the desire to build and maintain such a sacred place that forced people to organize, to settle, to learn how to farm and feed the hundreds of workers. The temple may have invented the village, not the other way around. So who were these artisans? We will never know their names. They left no signatures, no royal inscriptions. The sheer scale of the work implies a collective effort, a shared vision that united many clans. Yet the artistic consistency and the clear, complex plan hint at visionary leaders, master architects whose original blueprints were executed with stunning fidelity across centuries. They were the first engineers, the first sculptors, the first astronomers. Their legacy is not a name on a plaque, but a revolution in human potential, carved into the very bedrock of Anatolia. Centuries after the stones of Göbekli Tepe were buried, another civilization rose to carve its own empire from the Anatolian plateau. The Hittites built their capital, Hattusa, not as a collection of temples, but as a sprawling, fortified city of immense power. Its walls were punctuated by monumental gateways, and guarding one of the most famous were two colossal beasts. The Lion Gate presents a paradox of terrifying beauty. The lions are not mere decorations, they are architecture, their massive bodies forming the very structure of the gateway, their stone muscles taut, their faces frozen in silent roars meant to ward off any evil that dared approach. This was the work of the Hittite stonemasons, masters of bas-relief who could make solid rock tell stories of gods and kings. With bronze chisels and stone hammers, they learned to carve figures that stood out from the wall with such depth and detail that they seemed almost alive. They depicted the storm god Teshup brandishing his lightning bolts, and kings standing in the protective embrace of deities. Every scene was part of a vast symbolic language. The winged sun disk hovering over royal figures was not just an ornament, it was a clear statement of divine favor, a symbol of cosmic order and the king's role as the link between heaven and earth. The artisans were not just skilled laborers, they were visual theologians encoding complex spiritual and political ideas into stone for a largely illiterate population to understand. Who were these individuals? The records from Hattusa are extensive, detailing treaties, laws, and the deeds of kings, but they are utterly silent on the names of the artists. These masons likely belonged to highly disciplined royal workshops or guilds, where a collective identity and adherence to a strict artistic tradition were more valued than individual fame. Their genius was channeled into a shared vision, their personal pride absorbed into the glory of the empire, and so their legacy is not a signature but a code. Modern scholars are still deciphering the messages they carved, piecing together a world where artistry and spiritual meaning were inseparable. These anonymous masons did not just build walls. They built a cosmos in stone, a permanent order meant to outlast the empire itself. High in the Phrygian highlands, the clang of hammer on metal announced a different kind of genius. While the Hittites mastered stone, another culture was learning to command fire and ore. The Phrygians became legendary for their metallurgy, and their greatest patron was a king whose name echoes through myth itself, Midas. The legend says he turned all he touched to gold, a fantastical story that obscures a more profound truth about the artisans who served him. These metalworkers possessed a skill so advanced it seemed like alchemy. They did not need a magical touch. They had the lost wax casting technique. A sculptor would first shape a perfect model from beeswax, every delicate detail rendered in the soft material. This model was then encased in clay and fired in a kiln. The wax would melt and drain out, leaving a hollow, perfect mold into which molten bronze or even gold could be poured. Once the metal cooled, the clay mold was broken away, revealing a flawless metal object, a process that destroyed the original model and the mold, making every single piece unique. They also mastered repoussé, the art of hammering intricate designs from the reverse side of a thin metal sheet, pushing the patterns out to create stunning scenes that seemed to breathe with life. The results were not just treasures for a king's vault. They were objects of daily life elevated to art. A simple fibula, a cloak pin, would be sculpted into a leaping stag. A ceremonial cauldron used for grand feasts would be adorned with roaring lion heads, their faces twisted in silent snarls around the rim. Each piece blended utility with an undeniable artistic flourish, a statement of identity and power. This mastery was so valuable, historians believe these metalworkers formed secretive guilds. Their knowledge was a closely guarded treasure, passed down not in written manuals but through whispered instructions and hands-on demonstration from master to apprentice. To share their methods would be to lose their exclusive power, the very source of their prestige. This secrecy is precisely why the real people behind the work are forever lost to us, their identities buried under the weight of the golden legend they helped create. Their ultimate testament, however, is not made of metal but of stone. The so-called Midas tomb, a magnificent facade carved into a cliff face, reveals their architectural skill. Its surface is a complex tapestry of geometric patterns, a false front meant to imitate the wooden architecture of a royal palace, but rendered for eternity in solid rock. It is a tomb without a confirmed occupant, a monument built for a myth, and that is the final, brilliant creation of these anonymous Phrygian masters. They forged not only objects of gold but a legacy so potent it blurred the line between historical fact and legendary craftsmanship. We are left to wonder about the real men and women whose hands, stained with soot and calloused from the hammer, could conjure such wonders from the earth, giving a mortal king the lasting glow of a golden touch. From the golden glow of Phrygian metal, we travel south to the sun-bleached cliffs of ancient Lycia. Here, death was not an end but a door to a familiar world. The Lycians carved their tombs directly into the sheer rock faces, creating eternal homes for the departed that mirrored the wooden houses and temples of the living. These were not dark, hidden crypts, but bright, ornate facades gazing out over the landscape, a breathtaking fusion of architecture and artistry. Skilled artisans, armed with iron chisels and mallets, would scale these cliffs to sculpt elaborate structures from the living stone. They replicated the intricate crossbeams, pitched roofs, and even the pegged joints of Lycian wooden architecture, but in a medium meant to last for eternity. Each tomb was a custom-built house for the soul, a powerful statement of a culture that saw the afterlife as a direct continuation of daily life. Who were the people trusted with such a sacred and dangerous task? The tombs themselves often bear the names of the wealthy patrons who commissioned them, like the prominent figure Payava. His tomb is a masterpiece of narrative art, its surface alive with detailed friezes depicting scenes of feasting, chariot races, and epic battles. These carved stories were more than decoration. They were a visual biography, a way to carry the deceased's identity and achievements into the next world. They provide us with priceless glimpses into Lycian culture, from their clothing and weapons to their social customs and beliefs. Yet, the hands that carved these vivid histories, the artists who translated a life into stone, are never named. This anonymity was likely by design, rooted in the very structure of their craft. These master carvers probably worked in tight-knit family lineages, with fathers passing their specialized tools and hard-won techniques down to their sons. Their identity was collective, tied to the workshop and the community, not to individual fame. Their pride came from upholding a tradition and perfectly executing a vision that served a profound social and spiritual need. They were embedding their entire community's values and beliefs into the cliff sides, ensuring that the identity of their people would endure long after any single lifetime. In this way, their greatest legacy is their silence. By foregoing personal glory, these anonymous hands shaped monuments that became something far greater than personal memorials. They became immortal historical documents, carved not with the name of the artist, but with the enduring soul of a civilization. A single glance at the great altar of Pergamon is enough to feel the chaos. This is not the serene, balanced perfection of earlier Greek art. It is a battlefield frozen in marble, a divine war spilling over its walls. The Gigantomachy, the epic struggle between the Olympian gods and the giants, is rendered with a raw, emotional power that was entirely new. The Hellenistic sculptors of Pergamon did not just carve figures, they captured moments of supreme tension. Muscles strained to the point of tearing, faces contort in agony and rage, and billowing drapery seems to snap in the wind of the conflict. These anonymous artists achieved this breathtaking realism through technical brilliance. They mastered chiaroscuro, the dramatic play of light and shadow, by carving deep, twisting folds into the stone that would catch the sun, making the marble itself seem to move and breathe. They employed deep undercutting, carving so far beneath the surface that limbs and weapons actually detach from the background, creating figures that appear to be fighting their way out of the stone right before your eyes. While a few names are recorded in inscriptions, like the masters Epigonus and Phyramachos, they were likely the directors of vast workshops. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of other carvers, polishers, and apprentices worked under this royal patronage, their individual styles seamlessly blended into a single, overwhelming vision. Their collective genius was to fuse the established ideals of Greek beauty with a distinctly Anatolian sense of drama and power, perhaps drawing on older local traditions of representing conflict and divinity. The altar was a statement from the Attalid kings, a declaration that their city was a new center of culture and learning protected by the gods, and the artisans were the instruments of that message, their personal stories willingly submerged to serve a greater political and spiritual narrative. Yet their legacy is this very survival, the altar's tumultuous journey through the centuries, from a center of pagan worship to being buried and forgotten, then excavated and moved to a museum in Berlin, proves the power of their work transcended its original purpose. We may not know the names of the hands that gave a goddess her desperate expression or a giant his dying grimace, but their ability to convey raw human feeling in unyielding stone continues to speak across the millennia, a testament to the collaborative spirit that built wonders. Beneath your feet, a story unfolds in a million colored stones. Walk through the grand villas of ancient Ephesus or Zeugma, and you tread upon the work of Roman Mosaics, artisans who turned simple floors into epic canvases of mythology and daily life. These were not simple patterned carpets. They were complex illusions built piece by tiny piece, using stone, glass, and ceramic tesserae no larger than a fingernail. A master mosaicist would begin with the emblemata, the central figural scene. This was the heart of the artwork, often pre-assembled in a workshop on a terracotta tray, and then set into the floor like a precious jewel. Around it, teams of lesser skilled artisans would fill the vast background with geometric borders and repeating motifs, their rhythmic work covering entire rooms in a shimmering skin of color and light. The sheer scale was a marvel of logistics and teamwork, but within this collective effort did any individual hope to be remembered? Occasionally, we find a clue. A Greek name, a single letter, or a unique symbol tucked into a corner, like the personal mark of a carpenter on a piece of furniture. Was this a proud signature, a workshop stamp, or simply a mason's mark for accounting purposes? The silence is profound. These artists were part of itinerant workshops, guilds of specialists who traveled the Roman Empire from city to city, following the demand for luxury. Their identity was tied to their skill and their mobility, not to a single patron or place. The surviving mosaics of Zeugma stand as their ultimate testament. One breathtaking panel depicts the ocean goddess Tethys, her face rendered with such subtle shading and delicate features that it rivals any painted portrait. The artisans achieved this softness by using glass tesserae in hundreds of nuanced hues, creating a sense of depth and perspective that seems to defy the flat, hard surface. They could make stone look like flowing water or a shadow falling across a figure's arm. Yet the hands that sorted these colors, that chose each perfect stone to capture the light in a goddess's eye, are completely unknown to us. They embedded the entire world into their floors, from heroic tales to scenes of comedy, ensuring their work would be lived with and walked upon every day. They created not for distant admiration but for life itself, and so their legacy is one of intimate grandeur. We are left to search the intricate borders and hidden corners, not for a name but for a personality, a fleeting glimpse of the anonymous storyteller who left their entire soul in a million fragments, asking only that we pause and look down. A brilliant layer of gold leaf was the final touch, a light meant not to reflect the artist but to illuminate the divine. In the candlelit churches of Byzantine Anatolia, the iconographer's work was a sacred act. These painters were not artists in the modern sense. They were theologians with a brush, and their creations were windows into heaven, not expressions of personal creativity. They worked within a strict spiritual framework, following ancient patterns and theological guidelines that governed every aspect of their craft. The medium itself was part of the ritual. They used egg tempera, a patient and unforgiving technique where pigments were painstakingly mixed with egg yolk to create a luminous, long-lasting paint. They applied it to carefully prepared wooden panels, often gilding the background with sheets of real gold. This gold was not merely decorative. It represented the uncreated light of God, a timeless, divine space where the sacred figures existed. In the rock-cut churches of Cappadocia, these masters covered entire curved ceilings and walls with frescoes, their brushes bringing to life a celestial court of saints, angels, and biblical scenes. Every detail was a coded language, the specific shade of a saint's robe, the gentle curve of a hand in blessing, the direction of a figure's gaze, all held deep symbolic meaning understood by the faithful. An artisan would train for decades, first grinding pigments, then preparing the gesso ground, and finally, under the watchful eye of a master, learning the precise way to paint the eyes of Christ or the folds of the Virgin's mantle. This was a life dedicated to discipline and devotion, So why did they choose to remain anonymous? For them, signing a work would have been an act of profound pride, a sin of vanity that disrupted the spiritual purpose of the icon. The image was a conduit for prayer, and the painter was merely a humble instrument in its creation. To assert their own identity would be to block the very window they were trying to open. Their humility was their signature. This deliberate self-effacement adds a profound spiritual mystery to their legacy. We can stand before a breathtaking 12th century fresco of the Pantocrator in a Cappadocian cave church, feeling the power of its gaze, and yet have no idea whose hand guided the brush. We are not meant to. The artist has willingly receded, leaving us alone with the sacred, a silent guide who points toward heaven and then discreetly steps out of the frame. A single stone portal can contain an entire universe of order. After the spiritual intensity of Byzantine icons, a new architectural language emerged across Anatolia, one built not on faces but on forms. The Seljuk stoneworkers did not carve figures of saints or gods. Instead, they spoke a more abstract tongue, using geometry to express the divine. Their portals, minarets, and mausoleums are covered in dizzyingly complex patterns, a visual symphony of stars, interlocking polygons, and endlessly weaving vines. This was not random decoration. It was a profound theological statement carved in sandstone and marble. The repeating, infinite patterns were a direct representation of a universe without end, a glimpse into the perfect, unending nature of God. To stand before the great mosque of Divrigi is to witness this philosophy made manifest in stone. Every surface is a tapestry of intricate carving, where geometric precision flows seamlessly into delicate floral arabesques and elegant Arabic calligraphy. The effect is one of overwhelming harmony, a cosmos in perfect balance. How did they achieve such flawless complexity without modern tools? Their genius lay in the mastery of simple, timeless instruments. They used a compass to trace perfect circles, a straight edge for unwavering lines, and meticulously carved wooden templates to replicate patterns across vast surfaces. This was mathematics made visible, a craft where artistry and calculation were one and the same. The men who wielded these tools were not lone geniuses. They were members of highly structured guilds, where knowledge was a sacred trust passed from master to apprentice over decades. A young boy would begin by mixing plaster or fetching tools, slowly earning the right to learn the secrets of the template, the precise angle of the chisel, and the symbolic meaning behind each knot and star. His individual name was unimportant. What mattered was his contribution to the collective achievement, his role in a sacred tradition that served both the community and the faith. Their work is a brilliant fusion, blending the grand scale of Persian architecture, the flowing scripts of the Arab world, and the resilient stone of the Anatolian plateau. This synthesis created a uniquely Seljuk aesthetic, one that still defines the skyline of cities like Konya. The anonymity of these master stonecutters is their final, powerful lesson. They left behind no signed masterpieces, only a legacy of silent, breathtaking harmony. Their names are lost, but the puzzles they carved invite us to look closer, to trace the lines and decipher the timeless order they saw in the heavens, forever frozen in stone. The Seljuk stonecutters left behind a universe of perfect geometry, but in the windswept highlands further east, a different kind of miracle was taking shape. Ani, the city of 1,001 churches, rose from a plateau overlooking a deep ravine, its skyline a forest of domes and spires carved from vibrant red and black volcanic stone. Here, Armenian master builders achieved the impossible, constructing cathedrals that seemed to float on air. Their primary material was tuff, a soft, lightweight volcanic rock quarried locally. Its genius was not just its color, but its workability. Craftsmen could carve it with incredible precision while it was freshly quarried and soft, and once exposed to the air, it would harden into a durable, resilient building block. This was the secret behind the famous stone lacework that adorns Anna's ruins. Artisans chiseled intricate crosses, elaborate knotwork, and delicate grapevines directly into the facade, turning solid walls into screens of breathtaking filigree that filtered the harsh sunlight into a soft, holy glow inside. The Cathedral of Ani, completed in the year 1001, stands as their ultimate testament. Its architect, a man named Teodat, is one of the rare names we know, yet he was the exception in a sea of anonymity. He designed a structure that pushed engineering to its limits, employing pointed arches and innovative ribbed vaulting to create a vast, open interior that soared to dizzying heights, a space that felt both immense and miraculously weightless. But who were the hundreds of masons who interpreted his plans? Who were the carvers who spent a lifetime turning a single window frame into a masterpiece of stone lace? They were likely part of a deeply integrated system. Some worked within monastic orders, seeing their labor as a direct form of prayer and devotion. Others were employed by royal patrons, where the glory of the construction was meant to reflect the power of the king and the glory of God, not the individual craftsman. Their identity was collective, their pride vested in the communal achievement of raising a holy city from the rock. The political collapse of the Armenian kingdom and the centuries of turmoil that followed did the rest, scattering records and erasing personal stories. We are left with the stones themselves, whispering of a collaboration so profound that it feels like the work of a single divine hand. The techniques these anonymous masters perfected, the pointed arches and sophisticated vaults, would echo through Anatolia for centuries, influencing the very foundations of later architectural wonders. Their names are lost to the wind that howls through the empty arches of Ani, but their silent, soaring language of stone and light continues to speak of a human ambition that reached for the heavens. A single, perfect tile from Iznik holds a universe of color. Its brilliant white background is a canvas for lush tulips and carnations, all rendered in a vibrant tomato red and a deep, luminous cobalt blue that seems to glow from within. This is the legacy of the Ottoman court artists, masters who worked in the imperial workshops of Istanbul and Iznik, creating objects of such beauty they became symbols of an empire's golden age. For the first time, we encounter a system where some artisans did leave a mark, a small signature known as an imza. Yet this faint scratch of identity only deepens the mystery of the many more who did not. The Imperial Workshop, or Nakashain, was a hive of specialized talent. A single luxurious manuscript required the collaboration of paper makers, illuminators, calligraphers, and bookbinders, each a master of their minute craft. The entire system was designed to glorify the Sultan and the state, with patronage flowing from the top down. An artist's individual fame was secondary to the magnificence of the court they served. Why would a painter of such skill choose anonymity? The answer lies in a culture that valued tradition and collective achievement over personal celebrity. An artist proved his mastery not by inventing a new style, but by perfectly executing and subtly refining the established classical forms. His pride came from his place within the guild and his contribution to a grand, ongoing project that transcended any single lifetime. The Iznik potters are the ultimate example of this silent genius. They achieved a technical revolution, developing a new, brilliant white slip and a unique palette of colors that the world had never seen. Their famous tomato red was a triumph of chemistry and fire, a color so difficult to stabilize that its secret was guarded like a state treasure. They drew inspiration from the distant world, admiring the porcelain of Ming China, but they never simply copied it. Instead, they translated those foreign shapes and motifs into a distinctly Ottoman language, filling them with local flowers like hyacinths and tulips, which carried deep spiritual symbolism. We know the names of a few, like the master calligrapher Ahmed Karahisari, whose scripts defined an era, but for every named artist there were 100 anonymous hands. The woman at the loom weaving a silk velvet for the sultan's robe, the carpenter inlaying mother of pearl into a throne, the tile maker who painted the same perfect tulip 10,000 times for a mosque wall, their identities were absorbed into the greater glory of the empire. Their legacy is not a signature but a synthesis. In every Iznik plate and every illuminated page, we see the meeting of East and West, of technique and faith, of the individual hand and the collective vision. They crafted a visual identity for an empire, asking for no credit, leaving behind only the quiet, enduring whisper of their unseen hands. An entire lifetime could be spent perfecting a single shade of blue. This was the reality for a young apprentice in an Ottoman guild, rising before dawn to grind lapis lazuli or mix clay, his world defined by a tradition far greater than himself. The guild system, known as the Lonka, was the invisible engine behind Anatolia's artistic marvels, a structured world that both forged masterpieces and erased the names of the people who made them. These were not mere trade unions, they were intricate social and spiritual families that governed every aspect of a craft, from the price of materials to the moral conduct of their members. To enter a guild was to be initiated into a sacred trust. A boy, sometimes as young as 10, would be formally apprenticed to a master. His first years were not about artistry, but obedience and observation. He swept the workshop floor, stoked the kiln, and prepared the master's tools. This was not seen as exploitation, but as a vital foundation. He was learning the rhythm of the craft, the smell of the materials, and the unspoken discipline required to create something of enduring value. Only after proving his dedication and character would he be allowed to touch the work itself, perhaps beginning by painting the simplest repeating border on a tile or roughing out a basic stone block. The ultimate goal was not to express his own ideas, but to perfectly embody the accumulated knowledge of the generations that came before him. This system placed the survival of the craft itself above any individual talent. Guilds fiercely protected their trade secrets, which were the source of their livelihood and prestige. The exact formula for an Iznik potter's brilliant red glaze or a Phrygian metalworker's bronze alloy was not written down. It was a whispered knowledge passed from master to apprentice in the quiet of the workshop, often under an oath of secrecy. This ensured a consistent, impeccable quality that became the hallmark of Anatolian goods, but it also meant that the specific innovations of a single brilliant mind were absorbed into the collective recipe, their authorship forgotten. A master craftsman was deeply respected within the walls of his guild, but his fame rarely traveled beyond them. His identity was his skill, his reputation among his peers. The public celebrated the beautiful mosque or the exquisite carpet, not the hands that made it. The system cultivated a profound humility, where the highest honor was to be a flawless link in a chain that stretched back centuries. Why would such a skilled person accept this anonymity? Because his legacy was not a name in a ledger, but the living continuation of the craft itself. His greatest achievement was the apprentice he trained to perfection, who would then train another, ensuring that the knowledge would never die. The guilds created a magnificent paradox. They were the custodians of Anatolia's most advanced artistic techniques, yet they were also the primary reason we struggle to name the geniuses who perfected them. We walk through museums admiring objects of stunning beauty, and we are left to ponder the countless silent, disciplined lives dedicated not to personal glory, but to the perfection of a tradition. The very stones themselves are a hidden archive of lost skill. Across Anatolia, the choice of material was the first and most profound act of the artisan. It was a deep, intuitive understanding of the land, a conversation between human need and geological gift. In the soft, volcanic heart of Cappadocia, they carved not with stone, but from it, turning entire mountainsides into cities using a method called dry stone walling. Without a single drop of mortar, they stacked and shaped the lightweight tuff, each block perfectly fitted to its neighbor, creating structures that have withstood centuries of earthquakes. This was not crude excavation. It was a sophisticated reading of the stone's own weaknesses and strengths, a collaboration with the mountain itself. Far to the west, in the quarries near Ephesus, the challenge was different. The marble there was not soft, but brilliantly hard and luminous. Extracting it required an intimate knowledge of its hidden fracture lines. Workers would drill a series of precise holes along a seam, then drive in wooden wedges. These wedges were then soaked with water, and as the wood expanded with a slow, inexorable force, it would crack the marble along a perfect, clean plane. This was physics mastered through generations of observation, a quiet technology that yielded the flawless blocks for temples and theaters. The true genius, however, is often found in the smallest of details, the invisible solutions to problems no one else would see. A Hittite builder, facing the immense lateral pressure of a fortress wall, would pour molten lead into U-shaped iron clamps that locked massive stone blocks together. As the lead cooled and solidified, it created a flexible, incredibly strong bond that allowed the structure to shift and settle without collapsing. A Byzantine glazier, centuries later, faced the puzzle of holding together hundreds of pieces of colored glass. His solution was to cast the individual panes into channels of lead came, a H-shaped strip that he then soldered at each joint. This network of lead not only held the window together but became part of the artwork itself, a dark, graceful line drawing that gave the holy figures their form. These were not random inventions, they were the accumulated intelligence of the workshop, passed from an experienced master to a watching apprentice. The knowledge lived in the hands and the eyes, in the memory of how a certain clay feels when it has just enough water, or how a specific type of wood sounds when it is struck correctly. Today, an archaeologist's most telling clues are these subtle traces. The specific angle of a chisel mark on a Lycian tomb facade can reveal the type of tool used and the handedness of the carver. The mineral signature of a silver ore in a Phrygian bracelet can trace it back to a specific, long-forgotten mine. We can reconstruct the size of a Mosaic workshop by the consistency of the tesserae in the background versus the central emblem. We can see the entire process, yet the people remain just out of focus. They are ghosts in the machine, their entire lives dedicated to perfecting a method, their identities erased by the very perfection of the craft they left behind. We are left with a profound irony. The durability of their work, the very thing that allows us to admire it today, is what forever hides them. The marble is too perfectly joined, the glaze too brilliantly fused, the stone too seamlessly carved for any single hand to claim credit. Their legacy is not a name, but a silent, enduring testament to the power of skill, whispered to us across the ages by the materials they so loved and understood. A simple zigzag carved into a Hittite gate was never just a line. It was a representation of the mountains, the home of the gods, a sacred boundary made visible. Across Anatolia, the artisan's chisel was a pen, and every surface became a page for a complex language of symbols. These masters were encoding the deepest beliefs of their cultures into forms that could withstand the ravages of time. The Phrygians covered their metalwork and textiles with dense, repeating geometric patterns. To an untrained eye, these were mere decorations, but within that culture, the meander, a continuous labyrinthine line, likely symbolized the unending cycle of life and death, a concept of profound spiritual importance. They were embedding their philosophy into the very objects of daily and ceremonial life. This practice reached its zenith with the Seljuks. Their stonework is a universe of interlocking stars and polygons, each shape a deliberate choice. The eight-pointed star, seen on countless mausoleums and mosques, was not chosen at random. In their cosmology, it represented the 8 levels of paradise, the 8 angels supporting the throne of God, and the 8 gates of heaven. It was a mathematical prayer, a constant reminder of the divine order governing the cosmos. Even a seemingly straightforward symbol like the double-headed eagle, carved into Seljuk fortress walls, carried a layered message. It symbolized the Sultan's temporal power over both East and West, a political statement, but it also spoke of a higher, spiritual transcendence, the ability to see both the earthly and the heavenly realms simultaneously. The artisans who carved it were fluent in this dual language of power and spirit. This encoding required more than just skilled hands. It demanded a deep, initiated mind. A Byzantine iconographer did not simply choose colors because they were beautiful. The specific shade of blue used for the Virgin Mary's robes, a costly pigment made from crushed lapis lazuli, represented her humility and her role as the bridge between heaven and earth. The brilliant gold leaf of the background was the uncreated light of God himself. The artisan had to be a theologian, understanding the precise symbolic meaning of every gesture, every garment, every hue. This transforms our understanding of their role. They were not manual laborers executing a patron's vague idea. They were educated collaborators, trusted with translating abstract, complex doctrines into a visual form that could educate the faithful, reinforce political authority, and connect the community to the divine. Their anonymity then becomes even more poignant. They willingly submerged their individual identities to become clear vessels for a message far greater than themselves. They were the keepers of a visual code, the scribes of stone and clay, and so their greatest legacy is this silent challenge. They left behind not just art but a series of intricate puzzles. When we stand before a Seljuk portal shimmering with stone stars or a Phrygian textile woven with endless knots, we are being asked a question: can we learn to read their language? Can we decipher the messages they so carefully embedded, not for their own glory, but for the memory of an entire civilization? A conqueror's first act is often to erase the names of the past. Across Anatolia, the relentless tide of empires did not just topple kings, it systematically dismantled the memory of the creators. When Persian armies marched through, they looted archives. When Roman legions fortified a captured city, they melted down bronze inscriptions to forge new weapons. The Mongols left pyramids of skulls and burned libraries in their wake. Each wave of conquest was a cultural reset, a deliberate effort to overwrite the identity of the vanquished and claim the land and its wonders for the new rulers. This systematic erasure is starkly visible in the fate of sacred spaces. A Byzantine church, its walls covered in frescoes painted by generations of devout artisans, would be converted into a mosque. The faces of saints seen as idolatrous were carefully plastered over. The original Greek dedicatory inscriptions, which might have named the bishop who commissioned the work or the master painter who led the team, were chiseled away. The building remained, a testament to its builder's skill, but the historical fingerprint of its creators was wiped clean. The artisans themselves were caught in a relentless cycle of adaptation. A master mason whose father carved crosses for Armenian cathedrals might find himself taking orders from a Seljuk bey, learning to inscribe flowing Arabic calligraphy instead. A Greek Mosaicist might be compelled to work on an Ottoman hammam, blending his techniques with new decorative traditions. This cultural fluidity was a survival strategy, and it produced breathtaking syntheses like the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, which stands on the foundations of the Byzantine Great Palace and incorporates spolia, reclaimed columns and stones from across the ancient city. Yet this very adaptability came at a cost. To please a new patron, an artisan had to subsume their personal style and the cultural markers of their training into the dominant aesthetic. Their individual contribution became a single thread in a much larger, ever-changing tapestry, impossible to isolate and identify. The result is a historical palimpsest. Anatolia is like a parchment scroll that has been scraped clean and written over again and again. You can still see the ghost of the earlier writing beneath the surface, a Hittite relief embedded in the wall of a Roman bath, a Byzantine capital supporting an Ottoman arch. The layers of artistry are all there, overlapping and intertwined, but the names of the scribes, the individuals who held the stylus for each layer, are almost always lost, casualties of the very turbulence that makes this land so historically rich. We are left with a profound irony. The cultural collisions that produced such unique and magnificent art are the same forces that forever veiled the faces of the artists, leaving us to admire a masterpiece whose creators have been silently absorbed into the anonymous flow of time. A single obsidian mirror found in a Seljuk home was polished to perfection over countless hours. Discoveries like this pull back the curtain on the workshop floor. At this ancient Neolithic city, archaeologists uncovered entire neighborhoods where homes doubled as studios. They found plaster bins holding caches of pigments, workbenches stained with ochre, and unfinished beads scattered beside burial platforms. The artisans lived, worked, and died in the same intimate spaces, their craft woven into the fabric of daily existence. This physical evidence makes their presence palpable, yet their personal stories remain locked in the silent objects they left behind. Modern science provides powerful new keys. The analysis of the Uluburun shipwreck, a vessel that sank off the Turkish coast over 3,000 years ago, reads its cargo like a global shipping manifest. Through isotopic analysis, which examines the unique chemical fingerprints in metals, researchers traced its copper ingots back to specific Cypriot mines. Its tin traveled from distant Afghanistan, its ebony from Egypt, and its amber from the Baltic. This single wreckage paints a stunning picture of a vast, interconnected Bronze Age economy, proving that artisans in Anatolian ports had access to materials from across the known world. Three-dimensional scanning now allows us to see the individual tool marks on a Hittite statue, revealing whether the carver was left or right-handed, the specific angle of their chisel, and the sequence of their cuts. We can reconstruct their physical movements, but we cannot recover their name. This tension between knowing how and not knowing who defines the entire pursuit. Some scholars, like Professor Mehmet Özdogan, propose a compelling theory. He suggests that in these early, close-knit societies, the most skilled artisans were not mere laborers. They likely held shaman-like status, individuals who possessed the secret, almost magical knowledge of transforming raw earth into objects of power and beauty. The potter who could summon fire from a kiln, or the flint knapper who could conjure a sharp blade from a dull stone, was bridging the gap between the mundane and the divine. Their craft was a spiritual practice. In our own time, we often reinterpret these anonymous figures through a modern lens. We might imagine the carver of a defiant expression on a Pergamon frieze as a rebellious artist secretly challenging his patron. Or we see the designer of a complex Seljuk geometric pattern as a solitary visionary. These projections tell us more about our own desire for individual recognition than they do about the past's collective reality. The truth is far more elusive, a shadow moving behind the dazzling artifacts. Each new excavation, each technological breakthrough, adds another crucial piece to the puzzle. We now know the trade routes, the workshop layouts, and the chemical compositions. We can hypothesize about their social roles and spiritual beliefs. Yet the full picture of the individual human being behind the craft, their hopes, their dreams, their name remains a silhouette, an outline we are forever refining with every shard of pottery and every scan of stone. A master architect in ancient Egypt could achieve immortality with a single inscription. Imhotep, who designed the step pyramid, was not just remembered, he was later worshipped as a god. In classical Greece, the sculptor Phidias was a celebrity, his name celebrated for the colossal statue of Zeus at Olympia, one of the seven wonders. Even in Mesopotamia, the meticulous artisans who carved intricate cylinder seals, the personal signatures of the ancient world, occasionally scratched their own names into the tiny stone surfaces. Anatolia stands in stark contrast to this emerging culture of the named artist. Here, from the earliest tools found in Carrhaen Cave to the golden treasures of Midas, the creators remain stubbornly, uniformly silent. This is not a historical accident. It is a profound cultural choice. While other civilizations began to elevate the individual genius, Anatolian societies consistently channeled artistic glory toward the community, the ruler, or the divine. An artisan was not a star to be celebrated, but a vessel to be filled with a purpose greater than themselves. Their skill was a form of service. In Egypt, a pyramid was a pharaoh's personal stairway to the gods, and the architect's name was part of that eternal project. In Anatolia, a temple like Göbekli Tepe was a collective spiritual endeavor for an entire people, and the name of its designer was irrelevant to its holy function. This mindset transforms the very meaning of their legacy. We are not looking for lost celebrities, but for the silent architects of an entire worldview. Their anonymity is not an empty space where a name should be. It is a positive statement, a powerful declaration that the message carved into the stone was infinitely more important than the hand that held the chisel. This deliberate self-effacement deepens the mystery, forcing us to ask not who they were, but what profound belief system could inspire such a unified, lasting, and humble devotion to craft. Their silence was a deliberate choice, not a historical oversight. Why would a master carver who could make stone breathe, or a painter who could capture the divine, willingly vanish from their own creation? The answer lies in a psychology alien to our modern cult of the individual. For many of these artisans, putting a name to a sacred object was an act of profound arrogance. It was like trying to claim ownership of a prayer. In a world governed by gods and spirits, such pride was dangerous. It risked attracting the evil eye, a malevolent force of envy that could blight both the artist and the artwork. Anonymity was a spiritual shield, a way to protect the work's power and its creator's soul. The ultimate purpose was to serve the divine, not the self. This humility was a form of piety, a recognition that their talent was a gift to be used in service, not a tool for personal fame. The Byzantine iconographer, whose face we will never know, would have been horrified at the thought of signing his name to an image of Christ. His brush was a conduit for grace, and to insert his own identity would be to block that sacred channel. His reward was not earthly acclaim, but the hope of spiritual salvation. But the drive was not solely born of fear. There was also a deep communal satisfaction. Imagine the tight-knit guild, a second family bound by secrets and shared purpose. Within those workshop walls, recognition was everything. The nod of approval from a respected master, the respect of fellow artisans who could truly appreciate the difficulty of a perfect glaze or a seamless joint. This was the real currency of achievement. Their identity was forged in the collective. They were part of a lineage, a living chain of knowledge where their greatest legacy was the apprentice they trained to equal or surpass their own skill. This mindset created a unique artistic environment. When the creator's ego is removed, the artwork itself becomes a purer vessel. It is no longer tethered to a single person's biography or intentions. A Lycian tomb facade carved without a signature becomes a monument to an entire community's beliefs about death and the afterlife. A Seljuk geometric pattern, its designer unknown, becomes a universal expression of cosmic order, open for anyone to interpret and find meaning in. This self-effacement allowed these works to transcend their original moment. We are free to connect with them on our own terms, to project our own wonder onto them without the distracting presence of a famous artist's name. The anonymous artisans of Anatolia understood a profound truth about legacy. They built theirs not on the fragile parchment of a single name, but in the enduring stone of the work itself. They asked for no credit, and in doing so, they achieved something far greater, a timeless conversation with anyone who stands before their silent, magnificent creations. Their hands shaped the very fabric of ancient life, yet history assigned them no names. While we marvel at the monuments built by men, the domestic spaces of Anatolia whisper of a different kind of mastery, one traditionally wielded by women. Archaeological finds in countless homes, from spindle walls worn smooth by use to delicate bone shuttles and loom weights, tell a silent story of immense skill. These were the tools of the textile artists, creators of the vibrant tapestries, intricate rugs, and elaborate fabrics that clothed the living, adorned temples, and defined cultural identity. Hittite cuneiform tablets confirm this, meticulously recording the work of female weavers who produced sacred textiles for the gods, their labor as essential to ritual as any priest's prayer. In Phrygian centers, the distinctive polychrome pottery with its bold geometric designs may well have been the domain of women, their artistic sensibilities flowing from the loom to the clay vessel. Their contributions formed the backbone of both the domestic economy and long-distance trade, with Anatolian textiles being prized across the ancient world. Yet, these women faced a double veil of anonymity. Not only were they artisans, a group already overlooked by history, but they were women in societies where public record-keeping prioritized the deeds of men. Their work was often categorized as domestic craft, not high art, a bias that has persisted in modern scholarship. To find them, we must learn to read a different archive. We must look at the minuscule fingerprints preserved in the clay of a pot, impressions made by the very hands that formed it. We must consider the burial of a woman with her prized weaving tools, placed beside her as treasures for the afterlife. These subtle clues challenge the traditional narrative that places all genius in the public square. What masterpieces of color and pattern were lost when a fabric decayed? What stories were woven into a rug that returned to dust? The legacy of these women is a haunting silence within the silence, a reminder that the most essential threads in the tapestry of history are often the most fragile and the most easily overlooked. The same red clay used to shape an ancient Hittite vessel now spins on a potter's wheel in modern-day Iznik. Across Turkey, the legacy of those anonymous masters is not locked in museums alone. It breathes in the hands of contemporary artisans who are the living inheritors of a timeless dialogue with the land. In the fairy chimneys of Cappadocia, stone carvers use the same dry stacking techniques their predecessors perfected millennia ago, their mallets tapping out a rhythm that would be familiar to the builders of underground cities. In small, sunlit workshops, weavers sit before towering looms, their fingers tying the intricate knots of a carpet whose geometric patterns are direct descendants of Seljuk designs. These modern creators are not simply replicating old forms, they are reviving a spirit drawing from a deep well of oral tradition and ancestral memory. The exact hue of an Iznik blue, the precise tension in a silk thread, the specific angle of a calligraphy nib, these are secrets passed not from a textbook, but from a master's demonstration to an apprentice's watchful eye, continuing an unbroken chain of knowledge that defies the written record. Yet, for all their skill, these modern masters face a familiar struggle for recognition. In a globalized market flooded with machine-made imitations, the profound story behind a hand-woven kilim or a meticulously painted ceramic plate can be lost. The artisan's name, once again, risks being overshadowed by the object itself. Organizations and cooperatives have become the new guilds, fighting to preserve these techniques and ensure a fair livelihood for the craftspeople. They champion the work, but the original innovators, the first minds who devised the double knot or discovered the perfect glaze formula, remain as shadowy as ever. This is the profound continuity of Anatolian creativity. Today's potter, etching a tulip into wet clay, is building upon a foundation laid by unknown hands. The craft itself is the true star, a living entity that has been nurtured, refined, and carried forward by generations of willing vessels. We are left with a powerful realization. The greatest mystery is not who made these wonders, but how their silent language of skill and beauty continues to speak so clearly, inviting new hands to join the conversation. Academic theories give us a new lens for this ancient silence. Structuralism, for example, approaches the vast output of these artisans not as a collection of random objects, but as a complex language. It looks for the underlying patterns, the repeated symbols and forms that reveal a shared way of seeing the world. The ubiquitous meander on a Phrygian pot is not just a line, but a word in a visual sentence about eternity. The rigid symmetry of a Seljuk portal is a grammatical rule in a stone-built declaration of divine order. By analyzing these recurring structures, scholars can decode the collective mindset that produced them, shifting focus from the lone genius to the communal brain. This perspective is powerfully challenged by post-colonial critique, which asks a more uncomfortable question. Why have Western narratives so often treated this anonymity as a simple lack, a gap in the historical record? This viewpoint suggests that the obsession with naming the artist is itself a culturally specific value, one that emerged from European Renaissance ideals of individual genius. In this light, the nameless Anatolian artisan was not forgotten, but was never meant to be remembered in that way. Their legacy was the object's function and beauty within its own society, not its attribution in a foreign museum. The groundbreaking work of anthropologist Ian Hodder at Seljuk offers a tangible example. His team's analysis revealed that elaborate art, like wall paintings and sculptures, was not concentrated in special elite buildings but was spread throughout the domestic spaces of the settlement. This widespread distribution suggests a society where artistic expression and ritual were deeply integrated into daily life for all, potentially reducing the social drive for any one person to claim special status as an artist. The creation of beauty was a communal project, a shared language that reinforced social bonds rather than individual fame. Art historians employ a different tool, tracing the subtle evolution of styles to map the influence of workshops or schools across generations. They might not know the name of the master who first perfected the deep undercutting technique at Pergamon, but they can follow the spread of that dramatic style to other cities, seeing how it was adopted and adapted by other groups of anonymous carvers. These schools become the characters in the story, their collective identities discernible through the changing curves of a marble drapery or the specific way a lion's eye is rendered. Together, these frameworks transform our understanding, anonymity is no longer an empty space on a museum label. It becomes a meaningful and often deliberate cultural practice. It asks us to stop searching for a single face in the crowd and instead to study the crowd itself, to understand the social agreements, the spiritual beliefs, and the economic systems that made collective creation not just possible but preferable. The silence of the past is not a wall but a door into a different way of being human. A legend whispers of Kawa the blacksmith, a figure who did not just forge metal but an entire nation's freedom. In the fires of his mythical workshop, he hammered out more than a weapon. He crafted a symbol of liberation that still burns bright in the Newroz festival flames. This is the final, fascinating transformation of the anonymous artisan. When history forgets a name, folklore often provides a face, turning the skilled craftsperson into an archetype, a vessel for a culture's deepest values and desires. Consider the Maiden's Tower in Istanbul, a structure standing sentinel in the Bosphorus. Its origins are lost to time, but a popular legend credits its construction to a master builder who erected it to protect his daughter from a prophesied death. This tale transforms an unknown architect into a universal symbol of paternal love and desperate ingenuity. Similarly, the nomadic tales of the Kurdish people are filled with mythical blacksmiths, beings who could forge swords that never dulled and shields that could not be pierced, their craft imbued with a power that borders on the divine. These stories are not historical records, they are something more powerful. They are cultural dreams, the real, nameless metalworkers who supplied tribes with essential tools and arms are collectively remembered as a single, heroic figure whose skill was so great it could alter destiny itself. Kawa, in the Newroz narrative, uses his hammer not just to shape metal, but to strike the chains off his people, making the blacksmith's workshop the very birthplace of revolution. His story elegantly solves the puzzle of anonymity. By elevating the artisan to a myth, the community finds a way to honor the entire profession. The individual is absorbed into the archetype, and the archetype becomes immortal. This mythological layer adds a profound richness to our mystery. We are no longer just searching for lost people. We are witnessing how a civilization chooses to remember the very idea of creation. The anonymous hands that built Anatolia's wonders did not vanish. They were transfigured. They became the wise builder, the cunning potter, the revolutionary smith, their personal stories fading so that their symbolic power could expand to fill the entire cultural landscape. Their legacy lives on not in signed stone, but in the enduring stories we tell, ensuring that the spirit of the artisan, if not their name, forever inspires the next generation. A single tooth can hold the story of a lifetime. For centuries, the identities of Anatolia's master artisans have been locked away in silent bones and faded pigments, but now new keys are turning in ancient locks. Groundbreaking technologies are beginning to illuminate the shadows, transforming the anonymous craftsman from a ghost into a person with a history, a hometown, and a unique touch. Take the science of strontium isotope analysis. The water and food a person consumes in their childhood leave a specific chemical signature in their tooth enamel, a geological fingerprint that remains unchanged for millennia. When archaeologists analyze skeletal remains found near a Hittite quarry or a Phrygian metalworking district, this technique can reveal a startling truth. An individual buried with the tools of their trade might not have been a local. Their isotopic signature could point to a homeland hundreds of miles away, suggesting they were a migrant worker, a sought-after specialist who traveled across empires to offer their rare skills. Suddenly, the workshop becomes a more dynamic, cosmopolitan place. We are no longer looking at a static, isolated community, but at a hub of exchange where masters from different cultures may have collaborated, argued, and shared techniques, their individual journeys mapped onto their very skeletons. In the laboratory, a fleck of pigment no larger than a grain of sand is placed under a mass spectrometer. The machine hums, identifying the precise elemental composition of the ancient blue on a potsherd. This is not just about color, it is about tracing a supply chain. By matching the chemical signature of a paint to a specific mineral vein in a distant mountain range, researchers can reconstruct the trade routes that supplied the artisans. It reveals which workshops had access to prestigious, expensive imports and which made do with local materials. This economic footprint tells us about their status, their patrons, and the reach of their influence. Perhaps the brilliant red on a vase from a royal tomb came from a mine controlled by a rival kingdom, hinting at diplomacy or covert trade. The paint itself becomes a document, recording connections that written history never mentioned. Even the most personal signature of all, the artist's own hand, is now becoming visible through artificial intelligence. AI algorithms can be trained to analyze thousands of photographs of ceramic designs, mosaics, or carved reliefs. The human eye might miss the subtle consistency, but the machine can detect it. It might find that a specific way of drawing a spiral, a tiny variation in the curve of a leaf, or a habitual depth of a chisel mark appears again and again across different works. This digital detective work can potentially group anonymous objects back to a single workshop, or even to one individual carver or painter whose unique stylistic tick became their unconscious signature. We are not yet reading names, but we are beginning to distinguish one personality from another in a crowd that has been blurred for thousands of years. These are not magic wands. Each method has its limits and requires careful interpretation. Yet together, they are fundamentally changing the questions we can ask. The blank slate of anonymity is no longer empty. It is now a complex puzzle board filling with interconnected pieces, a migrant's tooth here, a traced pigment there, a digitally recognized brushstroke over here. We are slowly assembling a collective biography of the Anatolian artisan, not as a list of famous names, but as a vibrant community of real people who learned, traveled, traded, and left the subtle, chemical echoes of their lives embedded in the very wonders they built. But as our tools for uncovering the past grow more powerful, they force us to confront a difficult question. Is our quest to name these artisans a noble act of restoration, or is it a profound disrespect for the choice they so clearly made? The drive to identify every creator is a very modern impulse, one that can clash with ancient beliefs. In many indigenous traditions across Anatolia, certain sacred objects are considered the collective property of the community and its ancestors. To attach a single name to them, to pull them from the communal tapestry and frame them as the work of one individual, can be seen as a violation. It severs the object from its living context and turns a shared spiritual heritage into a mere artifact owned by a name. Imagine a beautifully woven textile, its patterns holding stories known only to a specific village. For an outside researcher to publicly attribute it to a single weaver, based on a family story or a technical analysis, might disrupt delicate local hierarchies and relationships, reducing a rich cultural narrative to a simple line in a catalogue. This is where archaeology must become a conversation, not a conquest. The most responsible research now involves deep collaboration with local communities, elders, and cultural guardians. It means asking for permission, listening to objections, and sometimes accepting that some stories are not meant to be fully told. The ethical challenge is to balance our insatiable curiosity with a humble respect for the silence these creators may have intentionally woven into their work. After all, the ultimate honor we can offer these masters is not necessarily to drag them into the spotlight, but to understand and preserve the world they built, a world where the work itself was the only signature that ever